everybody, and welcome back to another episode of So How'd You Get Here? I'm Angelo, this is Tony, and today we have a very special guest, Claudia Ramsumair. Did I say your name right?
Claudia Ramsumair Lyon.
Oh. Yeah, she did marry my friend Angelo, so now she has a last name.
Okay, cool.
A different last name.
We just cut my husband right out of it.
Yeah, he doesn't even exist.
He's not here.
He's not here, so we want your maiden name.
Claudia, thank you for being here today and being able to come out on Super Bowl Sunday. And we want to hear a few stories from you.
Well, Claudia, I've known Claudia for years. She is a casting director extraordinaire. She has a wealth of knowledge with casting, so I'm excited to hear. How'd you get here? Like, how did you go from Brooklyn, New York to Los Angeles, California, and get started in casting?
Okay, that's a long story.
I mean, that's why we're here.
So I'm gonna
Give
take it. I'm gonna take it back. Version. Yeah, I don't know if I can do that.
Okay.
So you may have to jump in and cut me off.
Okay.
But what I guess I would start with wanting to be a director.
Oh, I did not know this.
And also knowing that I wanted to be in entertainment, I wanted to work in television and film, but not sure what everyone did. I always thought that casting director sounded interesting. Like I would see credits roll on a movie or a TV show and think, oh, that sounds like that could be an interesting thing to do, not really knowing what it was. Mm-hmm. But the tangible thing to me at the time was directing, because that was sort of a clear-cut thing, and I'd seen other people go on and do it. So went to college, studied film and psychology, got out of there, had no idea how to get into the business, had no connections, didn't know anyone. And I was working in retail in New York City like a year after I graduated college. And I'm folding sweaters, and my manager at that store was like, what are you doing with your life? Like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I don't know.
Trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I just graduated. And he said, well, I went to college with a casting director. She's one of my really good friends. Why don't you give her a call? And so I cold called this casting director. And then I was like, well, let me cold call some other places too. And I looked up, and at the time.
Was this a casting director in New York City, though?
It was a casting director in New York City. Like the assistant picked up the phone and was like, no, we're not looking for an assistant or an intern. But why don't you call like some other places? So I called the only places that I've ever heard of, which were CBS, NBC, and ABC. And the only place...
Just cold called them.
Just cold called them, probably from a payphone. We're going back, you guys.
What's a payphone?
What? I don't know. I've read about it in history.
I see them in movies sometimes, but not sure. Right. But... So the only place that picked up the phone was ABC, and the woman there said, hey, we're not really looking for any interns, but why don't you just come in? And so I went in, and I was able to intern there through a pilot season.
Oh, wow.
And I got there, and they were like, hey, do you want to run the camera for these auditions? Yes, great. Do you want to go get a cup of coffee? Yes, awesome. Do you want to go to this comedy club? The shows don't start till 10. And they go on till 2 in the morning. Yes, I would love to.
So just to backtrack real quick, like, how old are you right now? 22, 3?
20, 21.
Okay. Yeah, so you're the yes girl. You're going to say yes to everything. Like,
exactly.
Why would you not?
I'm just excited to be there. Like, thank you for letting me in the building, right?
Right.
So I started this internship, and just, happy to be there, happy to do whatever they asked me to do, but still living at home with my parents, not really making enough of a living to make it on my own. I was like, I'm a college graduate. What am I doing here?
Right.
And so they were actually really great to me, because those casting directors, they had a network, which you guys know now. Like, you've got your network of people, and if you meet somebody who you think is interesting or can do something well, you give your friends a heads up, and everyone tries to help each other, and that's what they did. So when they didn't have something, and this has all happened like over the course of maybe 1 year, when they didn't have something for me to do, they'd say, hey, you're working on a new Broadway show and you need somebody to sort headshots for you and answer the phone. Hey, Claudia, you want to go there for a week or two? I would say, yes. Oh, my friend's making an independent film downtown and they need a PA. Great, maybe I'll be a producer. So I'd go do that for 2 weeks, which sort of enabled me to go anywhere and be able to sort of answer a phone and make an appointment and really be a little bit of a chameleon, and learn different things in the industry. So so one of the people that they introduced me to was this woman named Phyllis Huffman, who at the time was a Warner Brothers casting director, and she cast all of Clint Eastwood's films.
Oh.
So this woman says to me, okay, great. Do you want to start here and be our person? I was like, yeah. How much are you going to pay me? And she said to me, this was an internship. Like this is, and I was like, oh, I thought this was going to be my big break. I was going to be a paid assistant. And she said, well, I can pay you a few $100 a week. And I at the time said, well, then I can only come in 3 days a week. And she said, I don't like it, but you have a deal, right? So that's how I started.
Wow.
I look back on that and I'm like, who is that person? Like, what was she thinking, right?
And she would have paid you nothing if you hadn't even asked for that.
She would have paid, you are so right, she would have paid me nothing. And so I started there, and I was still running around I was there for 3 days a week, and I was doing the retail job 1 day a week. I was going to the other internship. Like, I was running around and still not making enough to move out of my parents' house.
Right.
Like, still living in the same place.
It's also New York City in when this is early 90s?
Yeah, in the 90s.
Okay.
And so I started that assistant/internship, I call it. I was there for a few months, and I was starting to kind of get down on myself and feeling like I was never going to make a living at this, because at the time it seemed like you really had to know someone or go to an Ivy League school and get in through finance or business or something. And so I was like, you know what? I can be competitive if I go to business school. So I started taking GMAT classes across the street from the Warner Brothers building.
I don't know what GMAT classes are.
So I don't know what it's called. It's probably called something else. But I was like, let me go get my master's. So I decided
in business.
I'm gonna go to business school,
Okay.
and I'm going to get a master's in finance and get in through film finance or something. Like, I felt like getting a business degree would be something concrete,
Right.
and that I would be able to figure out sort of a linear path that way, as opposed to doing what I was doing, sort of swimming around to different places, right? So I was working during the day, studying at night, and starting the application process for business school. And the same woman, Phyllis Huffman, called me in one day, and she's like, Claudia, what are you doing?
You're like, I'm studying.
It's a recurring theme as we go along. Like, people will look at me and they're like, what are you doing? Yeah. And I said, I don't know, like, I'm doing this, and I'm going to get my business degree, and I'm applying to schools, and 3 of them are in California. And
The Graduate Management Admissions Test.
yes.
Copy. No, they still have it out there,
There you
apparently.
go.
Okay.
There you
All
go.
right.
And so I said to her, I'm gonna get my MBA, and that's how I'm gonna get in, and that's how I'm gonna make a living.
You said this all in the conversation to her.
Yeah, when she
Okay.
was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm studying for these tests, and I'm gonna apply to grad school. And she's like, are any schools in LA? I said, yes, 3 of them are in Los Angeles. And she said to me, well, Clint Eastwood called me last night.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
great.
He's starting up his next movie. If you're applying to a few schools in LA, do you want to come out and be my assistant on the movie for a few weeks while you go and visit the schools?
And your
apply?
first question was, does it pay more than $200?
Oh, no.
It was free 99.
Free?
I said, yes.
Okay.
I said, yes. And she picked up the phone. Like, we were having a conversation like this across the desk. She picks up the phone, uses her frequent flyer miles to book me a ticket to LA right as I was sitting there, sent me home to pack my bags for a few weeks on this movie.
Can you say what movie it was?
It was Absolute Power. And so I went home, packed my bags, got a few $100 from probably my mom,
Right.
and got on a plane that Friday. And by Monday, I was driving on to the Warner Brothers lot. And let me tell you, anybody who's back east, a lot of people who are from the city will tell you, like, you all get your driver's license, but nobody really drives.
Right. Well, in the
right?
city especially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I had my license, but it was really the first time I was driving. And the deal was...
And you're how old? 22?
22
Yeah.
maybe? Yeah. And the deal at the time was, come be my assistant on the movie. all you have to do is drive me back and forth. I don't want to drive myself. Like you pick up the rental and drive me back and forth. And the other thing was, I'm going to be there for a week, and then I'm going to come back home to my family and kids for a few weeks, and then I'll come back for sessions. So I was sort of, first of all, I remember on a Sunday night, I did a test drive to the Warner Brothers lot just to make sure I knew how to get there and back.
Smart.
And drove on to the Warner Brothers lot on a Monday morning. I will never forget this. I had to drive through the ER lot where they were filming the show ER, and they were all playing basketball in the middle of the street, and and again, like, I'm like, God, I hope I don't run over one of these ER
Is this one off
actors.
Barham or off Forest Lawn?
Barham.
Barham.
Yeah.
Okay, I know what gate you're at.
Gate 2.
Yep.
Gate 2.
The bougie gate.
I was like, my Lord, please don't let me run over George Clooney or Eric LaSalle, because they would hang out in the street there and play basketball every day. So so I drive in, it was the biggest car you've ever seen in your life. I don't remember, but I remember it felt like the biggest car I'd ever seen in my life, and I'm like driving it onto the lot, just trying not to crash into anything. And I get there, and they're like, okay, here's your office. So I walk into the bungalow. Clint has his own bungalow there. I walked in, and it's just an empty standard office, and it was my job to sort of set it up with, whatever, phones, folders. And I remember just kind of sitting there and taking it all in, and this man walks past the doorway really quickly. And then he comes back, as I guess the office had been sort of empty, like that one office in that hallway. And he comes back and he pops his head in, and he comes down, he's like, Joel Schumacher, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Come on.
And leaves and keeps going. I mean, this was my first day on the job.
Yeah.
This was my first day on the job. So so that was my intro to Hollywood, right? Is meeting Joel Schumacher, driving through the ER set, and setting up an office at Clint Eastwood's bungalow.
Were you just in awe? Were you like, I made it? Like, this is where I'm going to do?
No. I was.
Or were you like, this sucks?
No. I was in my head. I was like, you just have to get this woman to the office and back to where she's staying without crashing the car. Like, I was all about just
the task at hand.
Drive.
Like,
yeah,
I get it.
Yeah, I was all about executing the task and not messing up, right? So I didn't think I had made it by any stretch of the imagination. But what I did do was completely forget about anything that had to do with grad school.
Oh.
I mean, those applications, they sat in a trunk somewhere, never to be seen again. I don't think they were ever
You're like, I'm going to work
submitted.
in Hollywood, and that's it.
You know what it was? The door cracked open, and I didn't look back.
Yeah.
Right?
Smart.
So I was there for that movie, and I never thought I would stay here. Never thought I would stay. And as that job progressed, I was like, oh, I can't wait to get back to. I was a typical New York snob at the time. I can't wait to get back to New York. I hate it. This place is so LA. Oh, they were all right. And before I wrapped up that job, I had gotten another job offer.
For a different casting?
For a different job.
Oh, okay.
So, and I don't even know how I did that, but there were other things that sort of presented themselves to me because, I mean, as an assistant at the time, you start networking really quickly with the assistants, and I was lucky enough at the time to be on a high-profile movie. So I was talking to the assistants at, on the desks of the highest level agents in town,
right.
and that was the information is always currency, right? And they all had all of the information.
Right.
And that's one thing I remember when I first came out here. Someone told me if you want to figure out what you want to do, get yourself onto a high volume agent's desk, and you will first of all know everything about the business, and second of all, it will help you figure out what you want to do really, really quickly.
Yeah.
So that was some good advice that I did not take.
I wish I had that.
I did
I wish, I wish I had that advice when I came out here. No one told me anything.
Boo.
I wish I had taken that advice, but I think, everybody kind of finds their own path and figures it out on their own.
Took me
But
about 20
clearly you're
years.
doing good work, because if you're doing shoddy work, they don't hire you for the next job.
They don't, but wait till you hear what happened on this interview.
All right, I'm listening.
So I get this interview to be an assistant at the WB network. and very excited for it. And I go in and I meet the woman, and they want to hire me. And I had interviewed for another job at Paramount at the time, at the studio. And the woman at the WB was like, I'd love to have you work here. And I said to her face, I'm not sure I really want to work in features.
Oh.
So I actually passed on the job to pursue the Paramount job. And
Looking back, do you think that's the right choice, or would you do it different?
looking back, it was the right choice.
All right.
And I'm going to tell you why. Because what I figured out was what I didn't know on that Paramount job, which didn't last long, by the way. Because
when you say Paramount job, do you get the job and they put you on a feature film, or are you working in all of casting, like Paramount's like network of whatever they got coming up?
so they put me, I was working for the head of feature film casting at Paramount at the time, who also cast individual films for Paramount, who was also on like the creative executive team. She was also a creative executive at the time. And so so I went from, jumping around these desks in New York where I was sort of making the rules and setting the tone and setting up what the desk was, to high-powered executive at Paramount Features. And I was in over my head. I was in way over my head. I didn't understand sort of the way Hollywood worked at the time and the way the business worked. So I specifically remember my first week there, just being overwhelmed and not knowing things that now I look back on it and they seem simple, but I didn't really understand like how messengers worked.
Right.
Right. And
Or just the etiquette or the language or
yes,
the rhythm.
I-
Yeah,
I-
it's
I
a lot to
didn't-
figure out.
I didn't know my way around. And I remember that first week, like losing like an audition. And I'm not going to say who it was, but it was an A-list actor's audition for a very high-level film. And I lost it.
You
And
lost like what, their VHS tape?
yes, I lost it. And I didn't even know the concept of tracking something down. I didn't know how to do it. And somehow it turned up at the end of the day. But I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life as like when I lost that tape.
That's amazing and terrifying. That's
It was terrifying. And I remember calling Phyllis Huffman and just saying, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I'm like,
Are you still juggling at that point a desire to move towards directing? Or have you laid that to bed and said, no, this is what I want to do?
I'm just looking at what's directly ahead of me. I'm in survival mode right now.
Copy.
I'm in survival mode, like making a few $100 a week. And when I got that Paramount job, leased a car, and it was just kind of like, how can I pay rent and pay the lease on this car and have enough money left for gas?
Wow.
That's where I am at the time. And so that job, I learned that I didn't know anything on that job. I learned how much I didn't know. And so I called Phyllis Huffman, who I look back on now, like she was like a fairy godmother to me at the time. And she was like, we got to get you out of there. And so
He's like, Clint has another movie coming up. Just wait.
well, I actually ended up going back 2 or 3 times. So I would go off and freelance in between Clint movies. Like, I mean, there are a lot of, we're taking kind of like the less than scenic way to get through this. But there was like a freelance period where I did go back and do Clint movies. And then I'd be like, okay, I'm done. I'm out of here. And then they'd be like, oh, we just got to call for another Clint movie. Come back. But the Paramount job, I got out of there in probably 6 months. And
What did you take away from that job, though?
I took away that I didn't know what I was doing.
Oh, okay.
And that I wasn't ready for that type, like that level of, I don't even know what. Like, I didn't know my way around like the Hollywood system and the LA system.
Also, big star, big budget, major picture, a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and I had been around that before at Warner Brothers, but Warner Brothers was, anybody who's like ever worked on the Warner Brothers lot, it's got that homey sort of feel to it.
I mean, literally,
It's my favorite lot.
Everyone says that.
Yeah.
Everyone says that Warner Brothers is like the most
It's my favorite lot out of all the lots I've ever been on.
There was something about it, and I guess it was the first time that I was in a corporate environment. That's what it was. It was a corporate environment, and people play by different rules in those environments, which I'm well familiar with at this point, right? But at the time, I was like, messengers, like roll call, like what does this mean, right? I didn't. It just didn't make any sense to me, and so she found me. Another film assisting job on Devil's Advocate to kind of like carry me over.
Literally talking about that yesterday.
Really?
Probably one of his he quotes like all day long.
That movie is really that's the best portrayal of Satan's character I've ever seen on film.
Yeah. It's a good one.
Anyway,
we could do a whole podcast just on that.
We're gonna stop this and talk off the books because I have a few questions. Well, Todd Tucker, by the way, all of these studio and special effects stuff, he did all of the special effects for the relief wall at the end. The plaster guys that come to life. That's all his work.
Wow.
Small world.
Small world.
Sorry, Devil's Advocate got me distracted. Go.
So I did that, but that was still kind of, it was a freelance job, and I was like, what am I going to do after this? And so the woman who I had interviewed with at the WB, I heard, and by the way, again, like this is like freelance jobs in between. Like there was at one point I was like just temping just to get by. But eventually this woman at the WB, the girl that she had hired instead of me was going on vacation. And she said, hey, if you don't have a job right now and you want to come in for a few weeks, my assistant's going on vacation. Like, I still, why don't you come? And I was, okay, great. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm there for a few weeks. The assistant's on vacation. And the assistant comes back and they make me an associate of casting for that pilot season. And the assistant goes back to being the assistant.
Ooh.
So she was not happy.
With you specifically? Did she hold you accountable or the whole office?
She was not happy with the boss lady. She was not happy with me.
Yeah, you got her job by being present.
She was not happy. Let me tell you that.
Show up.
Show up.
You gotta show up.
Show up. So it's kind of like, yay, but boo, like everyone like hates me here now, right? Because at the time, again, like I was new to LA, I didn't know anybody, and I'd sort of like jumped over this person who was probably gunning for that position herself.
Right.
And that's really how I got my first executive position. I was there as an associate for pilot season, and at the end of that pilot season, they put me under contract.
This is mid-90s.
This was Dawson's Creek.
Oh,
okay.
So I started there as a permanent employee at the TCAs for Dawson's Creek.
Wow. So I have one question regarding that. Coming out here, the first 2 years I came out here were the hardest. Mm-hmm. How long before you went from survival mode to, okay, I can do this? Like, what was that window?
I want to say it was probably 2 to 3 years as well.
Okay. Because I think there's a myth out there, you move here and then in a few months you're just on a show or something.
No.
And I'm like, yeah, you got to fail for 5 years before you make it.
Yes. And
even in the door.
The other thing that happens is sometimes you'll get a win and you think you've made it.
Right.
And then that job ends and you're right back to where you started.
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. Or even like, I mean, sometimes it feels like 2 steps back, but it's a process and it's brutal. And I think that's why there's such a revolving door out here. I've seen so many people come and go back home, like especially in the first 3 to 5 years that someone's here. Like most of those new friends that you make leave.
Well, I think LA is one of the most transient cities. Like people are gone within 1 or 2 years. Like over half the people that move here are gone. Yeah, because you just realize how hard it is. How expensive it is.
Even as an actor, I mean, you get into SAG, you might get a couple guest star. You get on a show, that show gets canceled. You might not get another show for 6 years or ever. You don't know.
Yeah. So exactly. So here I am, and I'm.
You got the assistant job, or moved up to associate,
and then they put me under contract as a manager of casting. So I'm 23, 24, and I'm an executive.
Unbelievable.
And so I mean, it feels like I crammed a lot into a short amount of time, which I did. I must have worked 20 jobs in those first 18 to 24 months. Like I worked in a lot of different places. I worked for a lot of different people.
So do you feel though, taking multiple jobs, even though it's not the thing you want to do, did that help prepare you for what you needed?
Absolutely.
Because I run into some people who are like, well, I'm only doing my one or two things and I don't want to take anything else. I'm like, well, that's where you might learn that thing that gets you that other job.
Absolutely. I mean, I personally, I would prefer to do one job at a time because it's really hard to focus on more than one thing at a time.
Right.
But even if you're doing something for 2 months and then you go do something else for another 2 months and then you go do something else, like that I think was one of the things that helped. And I didn't know it at the time. You only realize that when you look back on it.
Of course.
Because one of the hardest things I think about working in entertainment is managing the different personalities. And the sooner you go through that cycle of personalities, like the sooner you start adapting to how to deal with different types of people,
Right.
which is a big part of like just kind of remaining out here.
Oh, for sure. Also, take it back a little bit. So for the people listening and watching this, casting. So you got hired to be an assistant to a casting director in New York. She just had her own company and would cast movies individually, or she a Warner Brothers employee. Hence, Clinton had a deal at Warner Brothers, so she did Clint Eastwood movies. Now you go to the WB. They're on whatever the WB Ranch. They did their own TV shows. Then you go to Paramount. So like, how does that work? So do people just have their own casting offices and they're by themselves, or you got to work for like a bigger person?
Yeah. So there are casting directors and there are casting executives.
Okay.
And casting directors do the online casting, and they cast individual projects, and the casting executive will oversee that. And the casting executive is usually housed at a studio or a network. And then sometimes...
Does the individual casting director doing that individual project, do they have the power to put that person on the show? Or does it go up the chain? They're like, we like this person. What do you think?
The casting director?
The casting director.
Yes, they have a lot of influence, and it depends on the casting director that you're working with. But someone like Alexa Fogel, who I interned for in New York and has cast shows like The Wire and The Ozark.
Right.
I mean, if Alexa says somebody's good, they're good.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So,
But she's also earned that from being accurate and truthful over time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the casting director's word, it carries a lot of weight because a lot of that relationship is how she works with the writer, producer, director, and they are the ones that are really going to know what that creative vision is that they're trying to accomplish.
Got it.
So you really want to support that. And I try to not get in the way of that unless I think there's something really off.
Right.
So what's your next big project you're working on at this time?
So at the time, I was overseeing most of the projects on the WB. Like there were 2 executives and the head of casting.
Got it.
And we split everything down the middle. So we all kind of worked on everything. And I mean, if you want me to rattle off some names of projects
Sure, yeah.
at that time, it was Charmed. I covered Buffy. I did Gilmore Girls, Supernatural. What else? Felicity. That was a good one.
Can you believe Supernatural was just ended? It was like a 20-year run.
It's shocking. You know what? It was kind of like, it was like the last piece of the WB
Right.
that was still around.
Yeah.
So there was something about it, Never
And you-
forget Jeffrey Dean Morgan as the dad in Supernatural.
Oh yeah, that's right. Was that before he did Grace?
That was before he did Grace.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Wow. That's a trip down memory lane.
And you casted him, or the casting director did?
So the casting director will they're doing the online auditions. They're seeing 500 people or
Right.
however many people for the role. And then the producers say, okay, I think these 3 people would be my top choices. And he may have a top choice in there, or he may go back and forth every time he sees them read. And then the next step will be, okay, I want to test them. Do you want me to go into the details of what a test is?
Yeah, yeah.
So
I mean, just in case someone's listening and doesn't know that process, spell it out for
yeah.
them.
So then they'll say, okay, we want to test this actor, and then what you have to do then is negotiate a deal with the actor. So you have business affairs contact their agent and negotiate what their fee will be for the next 6 to 7 years on a television show. And so before the person actually even tests, which is auditioning for the higher level executives, they have to have signed a piece of paper saying, if I get this job, I'm committing to your television show for this many years at this fee. So, so you get your 3 choices. You hopefully negotiate 3 test deals. A lot of times, like, people will fall out of the mix. So you can say we like 5 people, assuming that 3 deals will make, just so you have options and you have context for the different takes on the role. And every studio and network has a different setup. Some places are set up like movie theaters, and at the time where I worked at the WB, it was just my boss's office, and they would set chairs up. And one actor at a time would come in and read, and then they would leave, and then we would all talk and figure out who was getting the part. And
that's not just based on their read, it's how they chemistry with other actors, look, who else you cast in the show, correct? Like
yeah, I mean, it depends on the situation. If you can get a chemistry read, that's great. If it's the single lead of a show, where it's the title character, then it's kind of like, oh. And again, you look back at that, and they were casting youth-oriented shows.
Right.
So you really had to trust yourself and your instincts and everyone else when you were like, okay, 20-year-old person, you're going to carry a show, right?
But I feel like that was like the WB's like golden age, because I feel like all those shows had like 6 to 8 year runs. Like they were on for a while, 10 years. Supernatural was like 18 or 20, something crazy.
Yeah, definitely. It was a pretty exciting time, because what happened is suddenly there was a period there. It was right after Dawson's Creek, and all the kids on Dawson's Creek got so much attention.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen like one of the greatest marketing campaigns of all time, like the posters, the songs, like you still remember all of it, right?
Yeah.
And
they most of them all went on to
huge
features.
careers.
Yeah.
I remember after Dawson's came out, that's when there was this change in the industry, where before that, TV actors and film actors, they were in different lanes for the most part. And when that came out, and then people started to make these sort of younger features as well, like I Know What You Did Last Summer, and the Varsity
Skulls,
Blues,
all those
Skulls.
American Pie.
So they were looking at the stars of the WB shows for those roles. And some people who may have only been in the feature lane were losing out jobs to Sarah Michelle Gellar and Katie Holmes and like, I mean,
Joshua Jackson.
Everyone. Yeah. So it was actually a very exciting time, because you felt like the energy of like a star being created, right? So
Question from a casting position. When I first moved to LA, like early 2000s, film was higher in most people's mind than TV. I mean, I don't think that's a fair judgment, but
well, I mean, you said yourself, like
said
you're like,
myself.
I want to. No offense, lady, I want to work in features.
I don't know about TV.
Yeah, I don't know
but
about
then I
TV.
feel like there was between whether it's Netflix or all of the online stuff, multiple series, Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, it's almost like TV kind of took a higher step and film was harder to get going.
I personally think HBO like changed the game when like Sopranos came out and all these shows, because it was like film quality TV shows.
Yes.
It's not TV, it's HBO.
Exactly.
Right?
That's right. That's
So my question is, from a casting position, did you ever feel the pull of that, or was it still the same job?
Well, in the beginning, before you really noticed that shift, because it wasn't happening, across the board.
Right.
You just had to be really scrappy, and you had to. I almost approached it like it was almost like guerrilla style casting.
Right.
Because the big agencies, they weren't necessarily telling you like, here's our A-list roster to put on your WB show. Right? So you had to figure out other ways to discover and launch stars, and you had to trust your instincts, and you had to kind of just like believe in people.
At that time, I mean, you can answer this if you want, but was it more about, oh, this guy's really talented, or like he's really good looking, or she's really pretty? They're gonna get the audience is gonna love them. Like they fit the role of ditzy blonde or goofy geeky guy, and that guy ended up getting the part? Or is it really like he went to Juilliard and he's like a classically trained actor. Like, look at the way he delivered this.
It's a
this
little bit
scene.
of both.
Oh, okay.
It's a little bit of both.
Without naming the show or the embarrassing the actor, can I get either the best or worst one of an audition? Maybe go high level too, like a callback that was like, oh my gosh, I've never forgotten that person. Because
Or their first several auditions were amazing. They got to the test and bombed.
That happened a lot. I remember this one kid who he had gotten a few movies, and for some reason he was auditioning up against someone else, and he was so nervous that we had to wait. All of the executives were in the room waiting for his audition. He was so nervous that he had to leave the building and take a run around the block
To calm down?
to calm down because it was. I mean, it's real. I mean, for anyone who's ever tested, will tell you it is really nerve-wracking. It's scary. I mean, I'm on the other side of it.
It's nerve-wracking for me when I get the call that I have an audition. Like, let alone like do it in front of a room of like people that are going to change my life.
Yeah. But I get nervous all the time for actors. Who knows when we go back to live auditions.
Right.
But I remember at the time, I would get nervous for every single audition and every single test.
Because you want them all to succeed?
You want everyone to succeed. You
course.
want to get the role cast. And, if you're a casting executive who's been close to the process along the way, then there's a part of you that has vouched for these people that are walking in the room.
Not to mention, like, you're for them. Like, you have a
Exactly.
job to do. You want them to do your job because that means you've done your job.
Yeah, and sometimes the cameras are rolling in 2 days, and you need to whatever it is. Like, that's the difference. One of the big differences between TV and film, right? There's like a very specific, fast timeline when you're producing a television show, and you need to get it done. Like, it's not like you can go back to development and go look for some more people.
So on a normal TV show that you've done for a role, how many people do you think, maybe not submitted because that's an insane number, but how many people do you at least read for an average role? Not a star where you're already going out to offers.
I would say, casting directors, it depends on the casting director a little bit,
okay.
because sometimes casting directors sort of have like their go-to people, and they'll bring in like those 5 to 10 people, and then there's some people that do deeper dives, and sometimes a project requires a deeper dive. Like if you're going for a show where you want like people to feel like real people in the world, and you don't want anyone too recognizable, then they're going to have to read some more people. I mean, my guess is for a guest star, maybe they're reading people for 3 days.
Okay.
What happened to the kid that ran around the block? Did he get the
He
part?
didn't get it.
Oh, he didn't?
He did not get it.
And he had credits. He had done stuff.
He had done stuff. But you know what? He went on and got other things. He was fine.
Oh, okay.
He was fine.
Do you have a crazy good audition where somebody came in and just wowed you?
Or was like this person, like Michelle Williams when she was on Dawson's Creek, like, okay, this person's probably going to win Oscars in the future. Like, she's that good. Or no one knows that at the time.
At the time, at the time, you're so focused on like what's right in front of your face, and you're just like, okay, is she right for this role? Like, do they make sense together? I know the greatest audition story.
Greatest audition story that you witnessed? Or just
Yeah.
like lore?
No,
Just, like,
well,
was
it's
at the
out. It's
WB.
out there.
Oh, okay.
It's a story that's out there, and
Is it
people.
the Ed Norton audition tape for Primal Fear?
No, but that's funny that you mentioned that, because when I worked at Paramount, Primal Fear had just come out, and I gave him a tour of the lot, not knowing at all who this guy was.
I mean, I've seen other people talk about that. Like every young actor, like the Clooneys, all those guys were, like, or Matt Damon, all those guys were going out for that role. And apparently he just like
Crushed it.
Wowed everyone.
Like people were blown away by his audition tape, and obviously.
I wish I had seen it. I probably could have seen it if I had even thought to ask about it. I was like, how do I answer the phone? They're all blinking.
What's this mean?
Right?
Right.
Yeah. What does this mean?
What is it? So go ahead. I want to hear this
I
crazy
think
good audition.
one of the best auditions I've ever seen was Ty Burrell for Modern Family, and that's a story that's out there. I mean, people have talked about how amazing that audition was.
I've heard a few snippets, but can you give us like the 2-3 minute version?
I heard
of
of
that?
something that he originally was not wanted by like the higher ups, but his audition was continually?
He was always wanted by the producers. He was always
okay.
wanted by the creators. But the first few rounds of the test, like, it wasn't clicking for some of the higher ups. And what the producers did is they actually went off and quietly just shot a scene with him, like a scene that ended up in the pilot, a scene from the pilot script. And we were doing
At someone's like home, or was that like on a set?
at the producer's home.
Okay.
And I want to say that they may have had other people cast at that time who were in the scene as well. And it's funny because we were auditioning a different role for Modern Family. And everybody was gathered in one of the conference rooms. And the producers were like, oh, hang on a sec. Can I just pop something in to show you? Like, I'd never seen someone game a network president like that in my entire
awesome.
career. And he popped it in, and people were laughing and clapping, and it was completely undeniable. And it's one of the scenes from the pilot, and he plays it almost exactly the same in the pilot. And I mean, that has got to be one of the best casting stories like I've ever even been a small part of.
What was, I don't know if you can even divulge this, but what was the holdback? Like, why did the producers love them, but the executives didn't?
It could be a million reasons. It could be a million, and there are a million people that have to agree to say yes to something. And a lot of times you never even know what that reason is. Like, I remember back, again, like early on casting, when we're doing an ensemble role at the WB, you couldn't have like too many people with the same color hair, right? Because can they tell the difference between them? and I think to a certain degree, some of those things come into play with any ensemble class that you're working on, in that you don't want people to kind of bump up against each other, right? You want every character to feel unique and distinct.
Right.
So I don't know exactly why it was such a struggle, but one thing I will say is once it was like a filmed audition, it was undeniable, and sometimes a live audition and a filmed audition
Not the same
come
thing, right.
across very differently. And sometimes a live audition will come across better, and it works better for somebody who's like working a room. And in that particular case, it was just shot the way the pilot was shot, so it worked.
What is your opinion on that? Because I've actually watched maybe other podcasts, I forget what it was, or other interviews where casting directors were asked, is it better to do the self-tapes at home where you can do it 1,000 times and send in your best work? Or do you like seeing people in the room fail or succeed, work the room, come in, know their stuff, and like kill it, and then leave?
I would rather see a tape.
Okay.
I would rather see a tape. I would rather somebody has... Here's the difference, though. When someone walks into a room, you can give an immediate adjustment, right? You can have them walk outside, have the director work on the scene with them for 5 minutes, and have them come back in and change it, and right there, see that that adjustment. But
because that's like how it is on set.
Yeah.
So that,
Yeah, you don't get to go run around the block and take a day to work.
You don't
You
get
get
to run
3
around the
minutes
block.
to get the line they just changed, and you got to nail it.
Exactly. The other thing is, when people are testing for a part, sometimes like they only have like the 2 scenes that they've been given. They haven't even seen the whole script. Like if somebody's being like really secretive about it. So, I mean, you have so many things working against you when it comes to like...
You mean in the room?
Just in general.
Okay.
In general, sometimes you just don't even have all the information of like where the character is going and background on, like you don't get to really dive into that stuff until you get the part. The other thing, I mean, I'm going off on a tangent a little bit right now, but some people are really good at auditioning and then like you just kind of get that audition for the life of a series. And that's another thing that you have to like be able to do to distinguish yourself as an actor is like, okay, great, you nailed that audition. Now, where are you taking this character? Like, how can you like continue to elaborate on this over the course of a series as opposed to just delivering this one note in this performance?
But I also have crazy friends that are really talented that can't audition. And will never get work.
Not everyone is great at auditioning.
Yeah. But that's how you get the job.
Unfortunately, that's how you get the job.
So should we just focus on auditioning well?
Yeah. or learn to like it,
Yeah.
learn to enjoy it, and really understand that auditioning is part of the job as much as
Getting the job.
getting the
the job
job
Yeah.
and doing the
Yeah.
job. Yeah. But listen, we're casting for a filmed medium, so like I enjoy watching a filmed audition so you can see what it's going to look like.
Right. So, like the ethnicity of like what's going on today, and like different roles, different nationalities being cast for like all this different stuff. Do you think that should have been shown more, like back in
Absolutely.
90s, and
Absolutely.
because I kind of feel like that whatever decade was like every show. Not that they looked the same, but it kind of looked the same.
It wasn't a real conversation.
Right.
When I left the WB and went to ABC, then suddenly it was. I mean, the first show I covered at ABC was Ugly Betty.
Oh yeah.
And I remember getting to that job, and my boss at the time said, "What shows do you want to cover?" And I said, "Oh God, I don't care what shows you give me, but please let me cover Ugly Betty, because I've never seen a show like this on television before.
Awesome.
And I've never seen
Yeah.
somebody who reminds me of me like this on television." And like I was like it was meaningful. I mean,
Yeah.
so
It's also real life, like that happened. I mean, it's families like that. I mean, that's every day.
yeah. I mean, there's so many parts of the business. I mean, the casting process is just like a reflection of what's been going on in this business on a larger
Right,
scale
right.
for this many years. And, the diversity that you're starting to see, on camera, I mean, that's also a function of like having more diversity behind the scenes. Like they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the entire entertainment industry was built in a certain way, and it wasn't really a conversation at the time, unless it was. And it was interesting because the WB also had the Wayans brothers and Steve
Right.
Harvey and Sister and the Parenthood. So they did have on-screen diversity, but they were on very separate shows.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And then when you got so you went from the CW to the ABC?
I went from WB to ABC.
Oh, WB.
Yeah. And I was at WB until the day they turned off the lights.
Got it.
I remember reading that it was shutting down, and I never saw it coming.
Wait, you didn't get a tweet or a text?
I didn't get a tweet or a text.
So when you went from the WB to ABC, you said Ugly Betty. What else was Grey's Anatomy? Were they just starting, or was that already going on?
So I got there, and Grey's was a hit, Lost was a hit, and Desperate Housewives was a
Oh,
hit.
so they
And
have,
I
like,
was
mega
like,
hits.
oh my God, I'm
Yeah.
working at ABC, right?
That's right when I hit LA, when those three shows were launching.
Yeah.
2004, 2005-ish.
Yeah,
right in there.
I mean, I got there, and those shows were like the hottest thing.
Yeah, they were all
The hottest
major hits.
thing. Yeah. And so I got to work on Ugly Betty, and I mean, I just got thrown into the deep end of the pool there, because it's funny. It was the WB. People looked at it as kind of like a junior network.
Right.
When I was working there, the president of the company was 33.
Of the WB?
Of the WB. The president was 33 at the time. And I mean, I went through a few presidents at the WB, but
Just
the
don't
one.
feel like we've done enough with her, Tony.
No. What I'm finding out is like I didn't have 30 jobs, and I'm like, I'm a loser. I wasn't running a network at 33.
I had 30 jobs, and I'm still not a president of anything. All right, go ahead, continue.
Oh, so
They
people.
thought of you as a junior network.
Yeah, and it was thought of as. And when I got to ABC, I was like, oh, this is big time, right? This is big time, and those three shows were like such huge hits that that was the beginning of more of like a corporate environment. Like this has taken me back to the Paramount corporate environment. So I had now had 6.5 years of executive training when I got to like that kind
Right.
of corporate environment. Because the WB, as you said before, like the place was called the Ranch. We weren't even on the Warner Brothers lot.
Right,
we were like
right.
on the Annex lot. We never had any buildings there. We all worked in trailers.
That's the one off Hollywood Way, right? Just a
It's the
couple
one off
blocks
Hollywood
north.
Way,
where you have
yeah.
to- okay, okay.
And so what they would do as the company got larger is they would just add more trailers and connect the trailers to one another. So again, like it was an environment that really cultivated creativity and it allowed us to sort of like think outside the box to get things done and try to just do things.
Right.
But when I got to ABC, I was like, oh, I want to say Disney owned ABC at that time, and that felt like big time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your position now?
So at that
You keep
time-
saying executive, but are you like?
Yeah, so I was at the WB for, I want to say, 6.5 years. So I started as a manager, and I was a vice president when I left.
Got it.
And
Then ABC hires you as a vice president?
Then ABC hires me as a vice
Ah.
president at the network. And I start covering shows there, and that was just
Do you cover one show at a time or multiple shows?
multiple shows. Back then, a pilot season at ABC was 35 pilots. And you would split those amongst all the casting executives. So when I got there, it was like a 34, 35 pilot
And you're the one
season.
person overseeing all 35? I
I'm doing 5.
was going to say,
Oh, okay.
that sounds insane.
I'm doing 5 and barely doing 5.
That still sounds difficult. And then you have foot soldiers, in essence, casting directors and other people who are your arms and hands and feet to go
Correct.
out and kind of bring you the best picks, and then you make your choices.
Correct. It's funny that you mention it as a foot soldier because I felt like a foot soldier.
You sounded like one just a second ago when you're like, oh, I was taking this job and picking up a car and getting tapes and like.
I feel like my approach to work is being a foot soldier. Like even now, like I like to have my hands in it. I like to touch everything. Like I look at it all as a collaborative process, but I feel like if you get too far away from having your hands dirty, like
It's
what are
impersonal,
you doing?
right.
disconnect.
Yeah, but how are you even like having an impact on anything?
Right.
Obviously, there's probably a lot more freedom and autonomy when you're doing an independent film or something a little smaller. Like you have maybe more say, maybe not. But there's also a lot more bosses and people you have to answer to on the corporate side or the studio side. So I'm assuming both come with some pros and cons.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of your taste, where do you prefer to land on that spectrum?
Well, now that I've been doing it for a while, I definitely prefer the executive side.
Okay.
And
Why?
I like it because I like having sort of a worldview of things. I like seeing how all the pieces kind of fit in together. And as a casting director, you're super focused in on the details, right?
Macro versus the micro.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And I just think it's interesting because as the casting director, you're concentrating on casting. As a casting executive, you're thinking about budget. You're thinking about production. You're thinking about casting too, but you're sort of touching all these other areas,
Right.
which I just think it's interesting. And the other thing is, after having freelanced for it seemed like so long, but I guess it wasn't long at all.
Right.
I mean, I freelanced a lot over 2 years, I guess, but it was the idea of going back to that lifestyle of wondering where my next job was coming from was not appealing to me. Like I liked kind of the false security of being an executive because we all know that there's really no security in anything at this point.
True. True.
So true.
That is absolutely true.
Yeah.
But with that, there's a security to doing, the more corporate steady. It's like having a steady waiting tables job versus I'm just going to try to make it one at a time on job to job to job. But that comes with a price, probably. I'm assuming the somewhat security that you get, people that you have to answer to, or
Yeah.
jobs you have to take that you don't want to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, a casting director, a successful casting director, they're only working on the projects they want to work on, and they're only working with the people they want to work with, and they get to pick based on the script.
Right.
But when you're an executive, you're working on everything they tell you to work on.
Right. Now, quick question. Do you still have any desire to direct? Will you ever?
I think
take
that'll
on directing one time?
always be a part of me.
So if someone gave you the shot to direct, you would take it?
I mean, I wouldn't leave my day job. However, yes, absolutely.
Okay, just checking. Just writing that down.
I've still got that keep your day job mentality, as you can see. I will never let go of that.
What are you currently working on now? So you went. Let's do a little recap. We did Independent, WB, ABC,
And now CBS.
Now CBS.
Now CBS, where I've been for about a year. I just got through my first pilot season there.
Via COVID, via online.
Yeah, I want to call it pilot season-ish because we're still casting some of the pilots from 2020.
Right.
Right. But two of the shows that I did cast that are coming out and were shot are Equalizer, which
Based off of
premieres-
Denzel?
based off feature and previous television show
Got it.
Okay.
with Queen Latifah and Clarice, which is part of the Silence of the Lambs universe.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know
Love
why
that.
I made
Tell us
that
about
face.
the lambs, Clarice.
I don't know why I made.
So when
a
you say
fa-
Queen Latifah, Equalizer, was that like they knew they wanted Queen Latifah? Did she have a deal at CBS and then she gets her pick of like the show she wants to do?
she was part of like the
She was.
development
So-
of the project.
So,
So
she
there
a
was no
producer on it
casting
as well.
Yeah, there was
Got
no casting process. It was Queen Latifah is the Equalizer.
So how often does that happen? Where like someone like Rob Lowe already has a show, and
Yeah.
now you just got to cast the other 5 people.
I would say it happens most often it happens with the talent that you recognize or that, our parents would recognize on television.
Got it.
Yeah.
So the network already knows. They're like, we should go after this name.
The
Who's
name
who's not working?
So let's say
currently?
it's Rob Lowe.
Right.
Rob Lowe will come in and say, "Okay, I have this idea for a show, and here are the writers, and I'm going to be this role in the show." And
Got
the
it.
network's like, "Oh, we think that's a hit show. Let's do it."
That's it. Let's go.
That's it.
Because I heard back, just probably a Hollywood rumor, but was he originally supposed to be the McDreamy, and he turned it down, and then became Patrick Dempsey
Wait, for Grays?
for Grace?
Okay, this was
Like,
before my time,
right.
so I only live in a world of Patrick Dempsey, McDreamy. I will only acknowledge Patrick Dempsey as McDreamy.
I think my question is more: how often does that happen, where they go out to somebody and they're
All
like,
the time.
no,
All
and
the
then
time.
it becomes like a 10-year hit? Like,
It happens a lot.
Yeah.
It happens a lot. I mean, we go through a lot of no's when we're casting a show.
yeah, us too.
Yeah.
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 We get a lot of rejection.
We get a lot
We
of
get
no's
some
too.
yeses.
We get a lot of rejection.
Yeah.
I got one yes from what was I going to ask? Wait, don't say anything yet. So at a show at the level of Clarice or Equalizer, the actual amount of people that truly have the power to say go or not. How many? What is that? 10 people? 5?
10's a good number.
10?
10's a good number because you start with, okay, the first person that has to approve you is the producer of the show, and then the writer of the show, the director of the show, and they're being advised by the casting director. And then they bring it to the studio. So you've got the head of the studio, development executive, casting executive.
Got it.
And then you bring it to the network, which is network development, network casting, president of network.
So
And that's
That's
if you have
a
one
football
studio.
team of people
Yeah.
basically are the ones that say yes or no to a show going all out or just shutting it
A
down.
show going, and every actor that you cast in the show, it's a miracle that anything
series
gets
regulars.
done. For series regulars.
And then the individual day players are the actual just casting director.
The casting executive. So my department approves every speaking role on every show.
Got it.
Yeah. And most network executives and studio executives,
Got
they
it.
approve every speaking role.
Got it.
Yeah. Which is a lot of roles.
Once you cast a show and the pilot has been shot, who makes that decision for that pilot to be, like, it's Equalizer starts today after the Super Bowl.
An
So,
army of people.
okay.
Like,
your job's done
more-
by then.
More
You're-
than
you
the
guys-
10 people
yeah.
that approve the actor.
Okay.
Many, many, many more.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what are some of the do's and don'ts of an actor coming into the room in the audition process?
Okay, so I'm gonna answer your question with a little bit of just an explanation in terms of from the casting process. The question that I'm asked the most, I mean, and it's the same question that comes up like over years, is is what are you guys looking for? Which is almost it's sort of what you just asked as well, which is, and we're looking for you, right? We're looking for the actor to walk in and be the best version of themselves playing that role. Mm-hmm. So what you shouldn't do is walk in there and it's a hard thing to explain because part of it is don't go in there and just do what you think they're looking for. You kind of have to do that to get the job, right? But I think what takes it to the next level for some people is, first of all, I think to a certain degree, it is very helpful to get comfortable with auditioning. And when you're comfortable, the people watching your audition are comfortable. The other thing, one thing that I would say too is like, don't apologize if you're going in for a live audition. A lot of people come in and they just start apologizing before they even talk.
Saying they're sorry for what? Oh, sorry.
I just got the material. Or just give the best audition.
You don't want to hear excuses.
Yeah, we don't want to hear excuses.
Right.
And another question that I get a lot is, should I hold my material or not? And most people don't care. As long as you have like a working knowledge.
That was going to be my next question. Do you need them to be completely off book for those earlier?
I personally don't care.
Okay.
Some people do. And that's the other thing about casting is you could ask 10 casting executives and directors the same question and get 10 different answers. Yeah. But for me, I want to feel like the person has prepared. And I mean, that's what you shouldn't do in a room is just go in there and not be prepared.
Right.
Right. And that's more of like how to help yourself though.
Of course.
Like there's not a lot that you can do in the room that's really going to like lose the job if you give a good audition though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if they flub like a line or a word? You know, like this, do people pick up on that? Because I feel
the writer does.
Of course, the writer does. But I feel like as an actor, you are trying so hard to get it all down, and if you mess up, and like I feel like that's always like in your conscience, like, oh, I just messed up that line.
You know what I've found that usually it's when an actor trips up on a line, they start getting in their heads.
Exactly.
And nobody else would have even noticed it half the time, except for the writer,
right?
Right? But it sometimes I've seen people spiral over one line that like gets in their head, and then they're out of the scene. But the real key is that no one else would have noticed if you hadn't
made it
a thing. Yeah.
This probably isn't going to be on, but just talking to you, I was watching the Victory podcast or listening to it, and they had Sheila Jaffe on. Oh,
she's great.
Yeah, and she was talking about casting Sopranos with the other Walker Jaffe, I forget her last name, and then and they did Entourage, and she was talking about Kevin Connolly asked the same question as far as the ring light and the iPhone and shooting at home rather than in the room, and she's like, I love it in the room.
Oh, she said that.
And you said, I'd rather watch it on film. So it was like you said, you can get 10 different casting directors.
Yeah.
And they all have their own, what they like.
But at the end of the day, like, give your best audition, whether it's like live or not.
Right.
And another rule of thumb that I always like to pitch out to actors is keep it simple. Keep it simple in terms of how you film something, but also keep it simple in terms of your presentation of yourself. So I always say, like, don't wear anything that's too distracting. For women, like, don't go too heavy on the makeup. Like what you're presenting should be like a good version of yourself, right? If you're auditioning for a doctor role, don't go dressed up as a doctor. Please.
Is that why I didn't get that one?
How do you feel about people coming in that are just like chatty? Like, are you like, listen, dude, come in, do your job, say thank you, and leave?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Listen, one of the best parts of the job and one of my favorite parts of the job is meeting people, talking to people, and getting to know people. I mean, I spend a lot of time taking general meetings with actors, right? But what an actor needs to keep in mind when they're auditioning for a role is you're going in for a casting director that has been hearing those same 3 pages of dialogue
for 3 days.
Yeah, for 3 days straight since 9 a.m, and they just want to get it done.
So on your generals with actors, is it just like you just want to know about them, like where they're from? Like
it's kind of like this.
Yeah.
It's like,
Like,
where
what
are
do
you
you guys do?
from?
Yeah.
Do you always want to be an actor?
What if they say no? Are you like, why are you here?
Why? How'd you get here? Yeah.
Why are you here? So how'd you get
Hey,
here?
that's our question, all right?
So how'd you get here?
Don't be trying to use our question on us. That's for you.
What do you feel? Are you at like the highest level you can be right now, as far as like your position in casting?
I get. That's a good question. So I'm ahead of casting, so I think that's the highest at a network level. But
So let's for the audience, network and studio, CBS. So you do all the network shows
for CBS.
and then CBS has the studio side, which will be like the shows that are on like Hulu or right. Is that not how it goes?
It's sort of how it goes. So studios can sell to everyone.
Okay.
So a CBS studio or an ABC Studios, they can sell to any network they want. The way the business is set up right now is they're sort of aligned with their sister companies. So most of ABC Studios content is meant for ABC. Most of CBS Studios content is going to CBS. However, you take a show like Modern Family, that was a 20th Century Fox show for ABC.
Well, I remember back in the day, wasn't Warner Brothers Friends, but it was on NBC.
Correct.
Which is Universal, right?
There you go. Yeah. So really the difference is the studio produces the show. They're going to physically produce the show. So at the studio level, you're putting budgets together. You've got a production executive. You are doing the financials. I mean, all of the physical stuff is happening on the studio side.
And then you take that to the network, and then they
Correct.
put it on a platform, whatever they sell it, whatever
Correct.
advertise. Yes.
The network distributes it.
Got it.
Now, would you ever get back into doing features?
I mean,
Or you'd have to leave your job currently?
I would have to leave. I guess it depends. Now that we're Viacom CBS, if Paramount wanted me to cast a movie, I don't know what that would look like.
Oh, I see.
But I would still be within the family.
Got it.
So,
What
I
if
don't know.
what if some people, in the downtime brought you something that you might be able to direct? What would you do with that? I just don't
I would
like
not
that you
talk about it on the podcast.
the very first thing you said was, I wanted to direct, and I want you to not let go of that, even if it's 20 years from now.
Is pilot season pretty much all year round now, technically? Or is there still like those
So there's
those
still
6 to 8 weeks where it's like the majority of it?
So it started as 10 weeks,
Okay.
and now it's about 4, if we're lucky, right? And
Because there's less shows? I feel like there's more shows now than ever.
there are more shows across the board, right? So we're in peak TV mode.
Right.
However, like when I was doing pilots at ABC, there were 35 pilots just at ABC.
And how many of those 35 made it on air?
It depends on how the lineup is doing at the time.
Got it.
So it depends on how many slots there are and what's working and what isn't. So when you have a stable network, you don't need as many pilots to fill the slots.
Got it.
And I think it was also a time where you didn't have Netflix to be competing with on such a level, so you could take more shots and you could produce more stuff. But so pilot season, yes. So you're still backing into selling shows in May
Got
to
it.
advertisers. So the whole TV system is built upon the calendar that kind of ends up at home base there, which is why you will still have a pilot season this year. I don't know how we're going to pull it off, but I think everyone is going to. I mean, everyone's making pilots this year, so we're still gonna do it. But yes, there are so many shows being made, like on every platform at every studio. So there's always something going on. It used to feel like everybody was waiting for pilot season to go out on some auditions, but now
Right.
there's always something.
Can you talk about what happens when you cast a pilot? They show it to the people, and then they be like, we got to fire this regular. Like,
Ooh.
he's not working.
That's the worst.
He's not working in the pilot. And you recast a main role.
Yeah, that happens, and
Why you got to go dark like that?
I know.
Because
my-
I want to know, because I
heart.
kind of feel like that might happen to me one day. Where, like, I get my break, and then they're like, yeah, this just doesn't work. Thanks for playing.
Hey, you're still going to get paid for that pilot, though. All right.
That is probably the worst part of the job. is
Firing
when
someone?
that
Yeah.
firing someone
Yeah.
when that happens. I mean, I felt like the Grim Reaper for a few years there when when you have to make that phone call.
Now, is that a chemistry thing? Is that like, oh, we saw something in the room, but it just didn't translate into the show?
It could be so many things.
Yeah.
It could be a scarf. I mean,
Come on. Why don't you just
It's
reshoot
usually-
it with no scarf?
It's
Dude, you gotta
usually
throw out your scarves.
It's usually not an accessory, but I will say I've seen more people fired off of table reads than after a pilot is shot and completed.
How do you get fired off a table read? You're just
Just
reading the.
Yeah, that happened. I've seen that happen before. Where they
Well,
just,
you just said it. How do you get fired? You're just reading it. Well, you're not just reading it.
Right.
You're auditioning
no,
again.
that's what caused it. They just read the lines, and
Yeah.
I was like, dude, are you gonna try at all with
Yeah.
this? Oh, I didn't know I was supposed to. What do you think we're here for?
Well, here's the thing. Traditionally, a table read is where you do just read through the script.
course.
However, at the network and studio television level, the executives are sitting there expecting a full performance.
Yep.
Good to know.
So that's really good to know.
Also, who's to blame when a show gets picked up and they shoot and it's on for 3 episodes and gets canned?
Like the Black Donnellys, which I loved. And
do
it
they
was on
come
for
back and be
5
like-
episodes, and then they took it
Do
away.
they come back and be like, who the hell casted this show? Like, it didn't even work.
No, it's usually not casting's
Okay.
fault.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the decision to cancel a show technically comes from a network president. However, what goes into that decision, I mean, is
Right.
I mean, there are probably as many people who decide to put a show on TV. That's how many people decide to cancel it. At the end of the day, viewers decide,
Of course.
if a show's gonna stick
But
or
sometimes
not.
I feel like that has a lot to do with, like, I don't know, they're going up against another show at a prime time, and, like, that show's killing it and no one's watching your show.
Yeah, it's sad. Oh, and you know what's sad is shows used to get more of a shot. I feel like they're quicker to cancel shows these days. Like, you have to be so great to be competitive now.
What about shows that you've helped cast that you were like, this is going to be a winner, and it never gets picked up?
I mean, so many, but I could name them here, but no one would have ever heard of them because
Right,
they
right.
never made it. But there's some that we still talk about. Yeah.
Like, this show should be, like, still on the air. Like, it's funny.
Yes. I mean, there's shows that never make it to air. I in all the years that I've worked in television, there's always somebody who's like, somebody should make a network for all the pilots that never went. And
That sounds like a great network.
someone.
That actually sounds like an amazing documentary.
I mean, that comes up once a year at
Yeah.
least from somebody, and I'm surprised no one has done it before.
Hey, Tony, what are you doing later? You want to start a network?
Why not? I mean, it only took us, like, 8 weeks to build this, so I'm sure,
Hey.
we can figure it
I'm
out.
sure we can figure it out. Anything you want to?
Is there anything that Angela and I are right for? That's coming up.
Okay, we're gonna
Is
sign
there
off
anything-
now.
Does the Equalizer need a 40-year-old Italian? Hey, I took my shot, dude. What do you
Dude,
mean?
I
You gotta
like
take a
that.
shot.
Dude,
That's my favorite part.
I love that you took your shot. Thank you for coming on our show.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Thank you for dropping all the wisdom and giving us a few details. And
I know so much more about casting now than I ever did.
Oh, I learned
And
a ton
and I've
just
lived
now.
out here for 20 years.
well, that's how it works. Anyway, thanks everybody for tuning in to an episode of So How'd You Get Here? We'll see you next week.